My guest today is Bill Shander. Bill is a world-class listener. He's passionate about helping his clients solve their challenges. But first, he has to help them identify the real problems and get clear on what matters most before devising a strategy. And that's where great listening and the right probative questions come in handy. Bill is the author of a new book published by Wiley, Stakeholder Whispering: Uncover What People Need Before Doing What They Ask. Thanks so much for being here today, Bill.
Thank you, Diane. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here. We're going to do our quick tips. So, my first question is this: what is the first and most important thing people should think about when they're assigned a task or they take on a project at work?
I think the most important first thing is that we have to not take everything at face value. The fact is that your boss, your client, whoever it is who assigned that task, they're doing things in the way that they're expected to do them, in the way that things are normally done. They're essentially being driven by their subconscious, the way things are always done. And so they ask you to do something, and the first response should be, huh, I wonder if that's actually what's needed in this moment right now. And this is going to be hard for especially junior employees to like, really, I'm supposed to ask my boss, like, is this the right thing? But that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to think about it, question it, and then make sure that you're going down the right path before you just assume that it's the right task in the first place.
Interesting. Okay, so if we can't be sure that our stakeholders know what they need and we want to help them figure all that out, how do
Yeah.
we do that? I mean, we've been told we need to ask questions, but it's not that simple, is it?
No, it really isn't. And it's funny, like, yeah, we're told ask questions, and there's so many problems with that. The first one being most people will say, well, which questions? I guess I'm supposed to ask questions. What questions am I supposed to ask? And even when you start to sort of gain experience and you have domain expertise, you know the kinds of questions you tend to ask in these situations. But the fact is, it's very contextual. It's very much driven by the initial request in the first place. It's driven by the context of the situation in your organization at that moment. So like an simple example, um, I was actually just writing something this morning about this. Let's say you're in HR and your boss says, "Oh, we need to create a dashboard with our HR data so we can make better data-driven decisions." Okay, should it be a dashboard? Which data? What's the goal here? And your boss may say, "Oh, well, we're trying to make sure retention improves." So it's about retention data specifically. And by the way, what affects retention? Well, it's our training. Do we train our people properly? Do we give them good benefits? All kinds of things. That's not just HR data, it's other stuff. And so those are the kinds of things that are going to inform the kinds of questions that I'm going to ask. And then on top of that, one of the most important things I talk about in the book is I don't just ask questions to get the answers myself. I'm actually asking questions to guide my stakeholder to actually help them figure out for themselves what they actually need from me. So it's really a Socratic dialogue. It's not just me learning from the questions, it's guiding them by asking good questions of them, get them thinking for themselves differently.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That is incredibly valuable. Okay, tip number three. What kinds of trouble might we run into when we try to work this way with our stakeholders? Because, we mentioned before, new people might be. Uh, and what do we do when we're encountering a stakeholder who just wants us to do what they're asking of us? They don't want to engage in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few strategies I recommend. First of all, this is like the short answer is find a new stakeholder. Like I honestly think it's truly like if your boss is the kind of person who doesn't want to engage with you, doesn't respect you, you're not a thought partner. I mean, that's not a great job, right? So long term, I'd say find people who you can work with in a more constructive way.
Yeah.
Shorter term, okay, we have to live in the reality we're dealt. In that case, there are a few things you can do. Number one, I always say, start small. Maybe this person is very impatient. They don't actually have much time, whatever. Can I get 5 minutes of your time? Can I ask you one question? And from there, you can build and earn trust and get longer, more engaging conversations with them. And by the way, the good first question to start with is, how are we going to measure success, right? So, you've heard this a million times. That's a good question to ask. But specifically, if I go back to the previous example, we want a dashboard about HR data to help with retention is the goal. Retention is the goal. Okay, now I really can home in a little bit more on what data we actually need, the kinds of things that should be displayed in that dashboard, et cetera. So, how we're going to measure success is a great starting point and maybe even a great ending point if you have a very short attention span leader. And the other thing I would say is that, it takes time to build that trust with a difficult stakeholder. But one way to do that, we know this from research about influence, persuasion, that if you're an expert, people are much more likely to listen to you. And that's easy for me. Like, I got the gray hair, what little I have. So like I walk into the room, I am an expert and people trust me immediately. Lucky me. If you're not that person, then what you can do is lean on others' expertise. So if you're walking into a room, your stakeholder gives you a request, rather than just, I have a bunch of dumb questions to ask and I hope you have the time for me. If you do the research, if you've actually studied what you do and you have some domain expertise, even if you're young and junior in your career, you can ask really pointed questions and cite research. Point to something that you've read about that says, hey, here's why we should do it this way instead of that way. Because I read this last week by a Nobel Prize winning author who said XYZ. That's something that might perk up the ears of your stakeholder and make them a little bit more likely to engage with you. So lean on others' expertise, even if you don't have it yourself. It's
Yeah, I
very
think
persuasive.
that, yeah, right. I think I find that tremendously valuable because I think we have a tendency, especially when we're young, to just dive in instead of
Yeah.
making sure that we have something intelligent to say when we do, right? When we are asking those questions and we
Yeah.
have an idea of what we're talking about.
And by the way, the fact is, like, I'm an expert, but guess why I'm an expert? Because I've read a lot of other experts. I've
Yeah.
read the research. Like, I didn't do my own primary research on data visualization, the other things that I do for a living.
Yeah.
I read about it and I learned all of the expertise and I packaged it up in my own special way. Sure, but that's how we all learn. We all are standing on the shoulders of giants. And so when you are someone who contains and knows all the stuff,
Yeah.
guess what? That makes you an expert. And that's all you need to be.
Yeah, great point. Thank you for that. That is so awesome. So I appreciate this information. I appreciate the three quick tips. Will you tell the listeners how they can find you and your book, please?
Yeah, of course. You can always find me and information about the book on my website, which is billshander.com, BILLSHANDER.com.
Excellent. Thank you. And listeners, thank
Thank you.
you. You are who we're doing this for.